Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kara's Cure Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. And with so much information on how to raise kids these days, it can be overwhelming. But I think parents, you're going to like this episode. I'm Kara Sundlin, and I'm joined by child psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders from the Institute of Living, who is here to tell us less is more when it comes to scheduling our kids. Thanks so much for being here with us, Doctor.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
So, I think I'm like every mom. I've definitely have fallen victim to this of like so-and-so's doing this, that, and the other at every stage, right? Like, oh my gosh, how come that you don't have your kids enrolled in this? Or even as they get older, do you have this many tutors or that many this? Or, there's so much structured stuff out there that we can get lost thinking we're not doing enough. But in fact, you say the research shows it's the unstructured play that's so important for our kids.
Absolutely. And like everything we do, we always take a developmental approach. And what we're talking about is probably more geared for younger children, like children 8 and under, early elementary school age children. Not that older kids don't benefit from unstructured time, but what we're really focusing on is the brain development in our younger children and how important it is. And that there's absolutely a wealth of research that shows that unstructured play, so play that is not organized nor directed by adults, it generally does not have a defined purpose or outcome, but unstructured play is a fundamental necessity to thrive physically, emotionally, socially, and mentally.
And so what do you mean by that? Like, what does unstructured play look like?
So unstructured play is just that. It's active play, and it could be indoors. I mean, I'd love for some of it to be outdoors, but indoors it could be, playing with whatever, dozens and dozens of toys that you've already gotten for your children or bought for your children. It's letting them choose what they're going to play with, who they're going to play with. Whether it's imaginary or real, creating the rules of a game, allowing it to be completely self-directed. It can be with siblings, it could be with a friend at the house, and it's a chunk of time. We're not talking about 15, 20 minutes. It's an hour or two, not on a screen, not with the TV on, but where the kids just figure things out. I mean, so many parents have joked forever, when they got a delivery to the house and there was a big box that the new piece of furniture or whatever it is came in a big box, and the parents said, I don't know why I'm spending money on toys. My child just loves this big box, right? And all the imaginary things they can do with that big box. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, so even I remember my kids when they were little, they just loved to come home and play dress up. My daughter would put on her Disney princess costumes. My son, strangely, wanted to put on a suit. But like they'd get home from school and they would just want to go change. And I don't know what they did after that. They ran around, whatever. It looks like chaos, but you're saying that's what's important.
That's exactly it, right? That kind of emotional chaos, it might look like from the outside, is just them sorting things out. It's their, in that, I love that example. That's like trying on identities. Am I a princess? Am I a student? Am I a sister? Am I, am I an astronaut? Whatever it is, you're trying on different things. What feels comfortable for you, right? You and I get home from work and we just want to get in our, I call it house clothes, right? When you get in your house clothes and you just want to veg. Some kids want to dress up and do other things, but that's their imagination at work. They want to be a princess, or they want to be Harry Potter. They want to, play and dress up and do these things. And again, you don't need a lot of fancy toys. You don't need, you can have certainly some dress up stuff. But you don't need a lot of additional things. Yeah. And this is where I really feel like of child daycare centers, right? So they're focusing on children sort of 5 and under, really do well with this. They might have, different child daycare centers might have, they might have the kitchen area, or they might have other kinds of play areas, but they just get to free play, right? They can go to the kitchen area and pretend they're hammering something or sawing something, right? It's just free play. It doesn't have to be directed by an adult. And actually, it should be that time where adults can step back and do whatever they need to do, right? Free play is a great time when if you're making dinner and you just give your kids some downtime or free playtime. Hopefully, if they're in school, maybe a little bit of homework's done. And they just get to determine what they want to do with their time.
Yeah, yeah. So what does it look like for parents? Like, especially if they're younger, I know sometimes people are worried to leave their kids alone. Obviously, you want them to be safe when they're really young, but like, how involved are parents in this unstructured time, or not at all?
So I'm actually giving parents permission to step back, right? It doesn't have to be that they're like, let's play in the kitchen area first, and then let's play that new board game we got, and then let's do a puzzle, right? That's parents structuring the play. This is called unstructured play. Now, it doesn't mean parents can't be involved. If you want to do a little tea party with your child, you can do a tea party, but let them direct the whole thing, right? Let them say, okay, is it time to pour the tea in, or do you want to wait, right? Let them really drive that bus and structure the play however they want to structure it. So it's not the adult saying, no, tea has to go in here now. We have to eat the tea before the cookies, whatever. It's not the time for adults to step in and direct it. It is unstructured, imaginative, creative play. Things can be done in the wrong order. Things can be done in any order they want. It is not about directing it. It's about letting them run free in their mind and their imagination.
And even like board games, you say that's maybe play and it's not on a screen, but those have rules. So part of unstructured play is there's no rules.
Yeah, and honestly, and I think a lot of times when you have bigger families, they come up with their own little rules, right? You can have a board game, or if you ever play Uno with any kids, I used to do that all the time in therapy, right? There, all of a sudden there's all these rules that you never heard about, and say, okay, we'll play with your extra rules, but it's things that they made up for whatever reason. So that's the kind of play that I'm talking about. If you want to play a card game or a board game, sometimes kids make up their own rules. It doesn't have to be that they're following the letter of the law, because in that situation, 2 or 3 kids are playing a game and they come up with the ability to solve a problem and resolve any conflicts by coming up with their own rules, then that's fine. These are the seeds of skills that lead to bigger problem solving, conflict resolution, social skills, negotiation that happens in any relationship. Those are the early seeds that happen in those situations. So even if they're playing Chutes and Ladders and they're not playing by all the rules of Chutes and Ladders, I love Chutes and Ladders, by the way, but the kids, that are playing have all agreed on those rules, then let them play. That's them using a lot of skills that are building blocks for bigger things.
So what about if you have an only child, or maybe the child is much younger and the older ones don't want to play or whatever? What if I grew up that way, I was an only child. Do you need to be arranging lots of play dates for this, or unstructured play for an only child is them learning to be on their own?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, the ability to play on your own, right? In infancy, we call it self-soothing, right? It doesn't have to be that, I certainly want an infant's needs to be met, but infants and then toddlers need to learn the ability to soothe on their own and not have every single need met in every single moment. So the ability to play, or to build blocks and then knock them down, and build blocks and knock them down. That self-soothing skill becomes the ability as we get older to manage our internal thoughts and feelings, right? Self-soothing is a huge building block as we get older to managing our emotions, right? Emotion regulation is what we call it when they get older. It's fine for children who are singles in a household to learn to play on their own. Yes. Do you want to sometimes, on weekends and when it's more convenient, arrange for some play dates or some, you plan, couple parents plan to go to the park around the same time so kids can play and interact, or maybe interact with people that they don't know, right? Mm-hmm. That's all those negotiation skills that it takes with, hey, do you want to go down the slide? I'll go down the slide first, you go down the slide second, right? All of those little tiny interactions are building blocks for bigger skills. So there's ways to do this that, and again, you can actively take your child to a playground and then just let them play and roam free. And, they don't have to be on the slide for 10 minutes and then go to the monkey bars for a certain period of time, right? They can just kind of play and run free.
And this was a question actually in the Channel 3 Mom Squad Facebook group. So if you haven't joined, just search Channel 3 Mom Squad, you can join. But it was a question that came up in the Channel 3 Mom Squad of, all right, my child, I'm starting to sign them up for activities. And we can really go overboard with this nowadays. But what would be a guideline? Like, how many activities do we sign our kids up for from the side of the couch that you sit on as a psychologist?
So I understand that parents are absolutely trying to do their best by their children. And so this is not meant to be a criticism, but I really want to emphasize that less is more, less is better, and you have to engage your child's motivation. So if you said to your child, listen, there's signups coming up at the town rec league to play basketball or to join a library group, what would you like to do? I mean, there are some kids that would just want to be in the library group, right? And there might be some interaction in that library group, and there might be kids that want to play basketball or they want to, do another activity. So engaging your child's motivation is important, number one. But honestly, certainly not more than one activity at a time, right? If they're playing basketball, and again, younger children, it's not, they usually have like one practice a week and then one game. It's not like it's a 4 or 5 day a week activity. So one activity at a time. It's not like they have to do basketball practice and then they come home and then they have piano lessons. And then after that, they have their special tutor time. We don't want to overload them. We want them to have downtime. We want them to have free time. We want them to have unstructured time. Now, if there are some children that do better with some structured time, right? They want them in a dance class. You want them to play basketball. You want them to do taekwondo. And it's good to have some structured activities, but I would not overload them, not more than one activity, certainly at a time. And it's okay to take sort of a season off, right? The seasons being, certain sports you play in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, and even in the summer. It's certainly okay to take seasons off. And by no means do I want even older children specializing and playing one sport all year round.
Yeah, so, well, let's get into that because that certainly happens. And there's this pressure, right, that people may not realize, but it's also fueled by the economics of things, these travel leagues and also some of the bigger teams creating super fans. So they start young. So, I mean, but people are starting, they're doing like hockey, which I know is a demanding sport, or you and I were both dance moms. The requirements to be a competitive dancer, they start having them come to practice a lot. But so what do you think about just where we are as a society of like younger and younger, they have to do more and more and more to even be on a team?
Yes, and right, there's a lot of socioeconomic factors that impact that because not everyone has the money to pay for those more advanced programs or travel leagues or other kinds of things. So that always becomes a factor to consider. And again, it really is tapping into your child's motivation. Is your child motivated to do a second activity, or they express a lot of interest in trying something new? Then give them that opportunity. It's just a matter of reading their behavior and not overloading them, right? Your children should not hate to go to practice or hate to go to dance class or hate, or really loathe it. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of reluctance, but it's really reading that behavior and using it as a signal to what your child is truly motivated to do. As I said, I love structured activities, so I'm not putting down structured activities. There's a time and a place for them, and they provide their own set of skills and benefits for young children. And as you get older, right, 12-year-olds might not spend as much time in unstructured play in the way that a 6-year-old might. A 12-year-old might want to do, a sport in the fall and then maybe a different sport in the winter and maybe even a third sport in the spring. But that's one activity at a time. And because you just don't want to overload them and feel like they have to have every hour structure in the day.
Yeah. And I think, there's also that struggle of working parents and them not wanting their kids to just come home with nothing to do because they're not there. I remember that as my mom being a working mom, yet maybe she probably didn't have the same guilt because it was a different society back then. She had probably different kind of guilt. But I actually didn't mind coming home once I got to a certain age, being by myself. It was my alone time. But now it seems like there's a resistance, like, oh, I have to find something for them to do after school because I'm not there.
Yes, and that gets to a bigger issue, right? And that is guilt, right? The hard part, I think, about being a working parent is that you frequently or constantly are managing guilt. Guilt that you're not there, guilt that you're not making, guilt that you're not working hard enough to make more money, right? You're always managing guilt. And so it's just being careful that you're not trying to assuage your guilt by overstructuring your kids. It is okay for your child to have some downtime. In fact, during COVID, I think there was more kids having unstructured downtime, maybe, and they might have been also possibly on screens more as well, but
Yep.
having some unstructured downtime helps you manage your time. And you can say to your child, listen, I know you're going to be home for an hour and a half before I get home from work. You'll be home from school. Please focus on getting your homework done first and then having your screen time or your free time or whatever else.
Right.
And, if day after day, your child's coming home, they've had no homework done. Clearly, they've been on screens for the whole time. And now they're having to start homework later. And now now they're more tired and it's more of a battle. That's when you might have to work on other incentives as a way to help motivate them, because ultimately these are always skills that we're trying to manage or build on long term.
Right.
And that skill is we do the less desirable activity before we do the more desirable activity, right? You don't get paid first thing in the morning and then work all day, right? You work at the end of a week or at the end of 2 weeks. So you have to do the work before you get the reward. And these are skills that we're always building on.
Yeah, I've definitely my kids have always been resistant to that. And I always think, come on, I wish you would do your homework right away. And they always want to, I need a break. But sometimes it's better for breaks, but they get into a break and it's hard to get them back into it. So,
Right.
Anyway, that can be a struggle for everyone. But basically, as we are talking about unstructured play for young kids, you're talking about dolls, art supplies, blocks. I mean, even just, people complain that all their Legos are missing. You would say in this thing, just hand them the random Legos. Who cares if they can make the diagram that came with the box?
Right. Right. And in that situation, maybe they create something different. Maybe their imagination takes over and they figure it out, right? They problem solve, right? I'm always getting at the underlying skills. They problem solve and come up with something, or they're missing some pieces, and then they find a way to compensate, right? Those problem solving skills, those conflict resolution skills, those frustrations, right? You start with having small frustrations as a young child, because then as you get older, you have to manage bigger frustrations. And if you don't have the ability to tolerate frustration or tolerate distress, then, if you don't learn those skills as a child, it's actually harder to learn them as you get older because you didn't have that ability to tolerate distress and frustration as a younger child.
Mm-hmm. So part of it is, I think we feel, like you said, we're managing guilt. So when your child is expressing big emotions, we immediately want to solve them. But what you're talking about is you're giving parents a free pass, literally free. This doesn't cost anything, to step back and to actually just kind of be on the side of the pool, just watching. And unless they're really drowning, we're going to let them figure it out. We're going to let them play. Not that we won't jump in, but less parent involvement is where we need to be heading.
Right. I mean, I'm not advocating for complete lack of supervision.
Right.
But, for your child to play in the backyard for an hour and maybe they throw leaves around. Maybe they create their own leaf piles and do things. Maybe they, are doing things that are a little bit risky, but they're doing things in a way that lets their imagination run wild. And we need to find ways to allow our young people to take small, I'm not saying, I don't want to see anyone jumping off a 10-foot limb from a tree, but find ways to take small risks. I remember so clearly when I was a kid, we had a park across the street and my brothers and some of their friends would create ramps to ride their bikes over. Now, these ramps were 8 inches off the ground. Not too much damage would happen. It was in a park. Parents had no idea what they were doing. And that was their way to work out some risk taking. And honestly, there's a little bit of physics involved there in terms of or geometry, like how high can it be? How do you make the board stay up so it doesn't get crushed? Like all those little things, and that's people interacting with each other. I mean, so it's allowing that time with peers or without peers. It's reducing that parental guilt that we carry with us all the time. Right now, I'm an empty nester and I still carry that guilt. What should I be doing something? Should I be contacting them? It's really letting them figure things out on their own, not always solving things for them, and letting their imagination run wild.
Yeah. So when it comes to older kids, there's, right now, my daughter is a junior. So the whole applying to college, and there's so much stress of, I got to get this test score, and I got to get that, and I got to do this activity and all this. And I know that even the top college folks have come together to say, we've created a monster. How do we dial this back a little bit? But as a child psychologist, and we're going to move up, we know under 8, unstructured is good. But what about when you're older and there seems to be all these pressures to build your resume and do what you can, and yet we're having a mental health crisis?
Yeah. So I know the pressure's out there, right? I had to manage it as well in my kids, but it's figuring out what is my need as a parent to prove that I was a decent parent by having my kids succeed more versus really understanding what their needs are, what's the best fit for them. And it's, as I've said, it's not the best college, it's the college that's the best fit. And, it's diving a little deeper. And, yes, you've done Taekwondo for 8 years versus you've done 4 different activities, 1 season each, right? So it's really looking at things in terms of quality, not necessarily quantity. Yes, you need things to, if you're going to apply to college, you need some things to show that you've been an active member of your school or your community, but you don't have to fill 3 pages with activities. If you do things and that's your passion, and you do them for longer periods of time, and you do them well, and you do them with your heart, then that's much better than filling 3 pages worth of volunteer activities.
Yeah, so the downtime is super important, and not worrying about oh, so-and-so's doing more, so-and-so's doing this. It's just what you're giving that permission. And we brought that up. As parents, we do have to check that, right? Is this my ego that I have to do with all this because everyone else is doing it? Or am I doing really what my kid needs?
Exactly. And you know what? I get it, right? That's a real thing, right? It's a real thing that, my child's success is a reflection on my parenting ability. That's a real thing. And so it's just being careful about what's my need and what is my child's need, and working hard to dial that back. Doesn't mean we don't push them sometimes, we do. But when we get that active resistance and stepping back and saying, is this really more about my need, or is this in their best interest? And being as honest as you can with some of that, because it is hard. And, the other thing that you touched on, which is inevitable, but I just like to call it out when it happens, which is social comparison, right? The more we compare ourselves to the family next door whose, kids went to these high level colleges and did all these activities, and my child has only done 2 activities, even though they've done them for many years. So they show a depth of activity. It's engaging in that social comparison, always feeling or worrying that we're inadequate or we're not good enough, as opposed to my child's reasonably happy. The standard I use is actually just okay. My child's reasonably okay. They're doing reasonably well in school. They have a couple friends. That's the measure of success, right? It doesn't have to be, you have to be the top in all categories. That's just too much pressure.
Yeah. And I know right now people are like, oh my gosh, reasonably. Isn't that, we got away from People get worried, oh, that's just average or just mediocre. But what you want to encourage people, at least in today's standards, is good enough is actually giving our mental health a break, right? Because I want to refer people back to a different podcast where you did toxic achievement culture. That's a real psychological thing. We've gotten to the point of like, let's make these really high test scores, perfect this, perfect that, especially in families where there's a little extra money to invest. And going that far isn't helping. It's actually toxic.
It really can be, because if you're, pushing your kids to do things that is just building their resentment and their anger and their frustration, then it's not really going to get you anywhere. Now, that doesn't mean that if your child's struggling in math and you have an ability or access to get some extra support in math just to help keep them at grade level or help them feel more competent, then that's okay too. I mean, so I'm not, but there's a difference between I need some support in this area and I need to be the top student. So I need to have the highest level tutor and get all this extra tutoring to be the top student, right? So it's what's the goal in some of these situations? What's the outcome that you're looking for? Where's the motivation? Is the motivation coming from within the child or from external sources? And believe me, I know there's lots of kids that are not hugely internally motivated and work more towards the external motivation. I'm not criticizing that. I know that that's a real thing. But how much are we really then pressuring them?
All right, so as we come to a close in the end, I want the takeaways, say the top three things that I want people to walk away with. Number one, when you say less is more, if we're going to put a number on it, no more than, say, one activity per season, especially for the younger kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and again, your child, right? You know your child, and there are some kids that, they're in an activity and it's a couple days a week and then maybe on the weekend. Okay, that's a nice thing. We do this together as a family. But it's really, I just worry about overloading our young people and not giving them just downtime where they just figure things out themselves, or they, go for a bike ride around the corner, or they do things where they have to invent things themselves, or it's because they rode their bike around the corner every day for the last 2 weeks that, someone else around the corner rode their bike with them and now they have a new friend, right? It's those sort of activities that create opportunities, and it's through these opportunities that more good things happen.
Absolutely. Those little moments really are, when we think they're doing nothing, they're really doing something. And it's okay to be good enough. Good enough can actually be really, really healthy. So less is more, everyone. There's your guilt-free ticket. We don't have to spend a lot of money or sit there directing everything. Nope. We'll actually have healthier, happier kids if we back off just a little. So thank you so much, Dr. Laura Saunders, child psychologist from the Institute of Living. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Kara.
And thank you all for watching. Have a great day, everyone, and be well. You can follow more information on the cutting edge of wellness if you find me on social media at Kara Sundlin.